did a series 4 or 5 years ago on the greatest commandment, and she was brought in to sort of talk about the New Testament idea of the greatest commandment, which is, I think, our whole point now. What I did was that I did the first week, and then she did the second week. She got the easy part. And so what I did for my part, because obviously I'm Old Testament, what I did was when the lawyer comes to Jesus and says, "What is the greatest commandment?" You know that story, right? What is the greatest commandment? What I did was, what are the options? What could he have chosen? Right? We all know, Lord your God, right? But what could he have chosen? And I sort of had 3 points. He could have chosen, "You shall have no other gods besides me," or before me, right? The first one. Which it seems to me, if you do that, then everything else sort of falls into line. He could have chosen, and in fact, I really make a strong case of this. I know that the Pharisees do their wacky stuff with it, but I really think there's a strong case for this, and that is that remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. I really do think that's really important because, in fact, it's that fourth commandment that actually ties the first 3 with the last 6. It is, in fact, that one commandment that combines God, space, and time. It is that one commandment that actually becomes the way in which we represent in our weekly lives the fact that we are not what we do. In fact, if we represent in our lives the relationship that we have with the divine. I really do think that the Sabbath really is important. I really do. And if you don't take Sabbath, you really need to. It's really important. So he could have chosen Sabbath, which is what the Pharisees do in their own wacky way. But he could have chosen Sabbath, and I think that would have been a really good thing. I mean, sort of taking a look at our society, I think it would have been a really good thing. He could have also, for me at least, the third point, is that he could have chosen don't covet. Because it seems to me that if you do that, it takes care of, I don't know, honoring father and mother, not murdering, not stealing, not killing, and not lying on the stand. Because I can tell you the reason why people forsake their parents, murder, lie, cheat, steal, commit adultery, almost all the time, is because they're obsessing about something that they shouldn't be obsessing about. So if we could just not covet, that'd be great. Shall we? You and me? Cool. Excellent. Beautiful. When all the people witnessed the thunder and the lightning, the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, they were afraid. Well, of course they were. Those are kind of big words. Trembled and stood at a distance, and they said to Moses, no, you speak to us or we'll listen. We don't want God to speak to us or we're going to die, because it's like, frightening. And Moses said to the people, whoa, don't be afraid. It's not scary, right? God's only here to test you. Oh, not scary. God, I haven't studied, right? He's only here to test you, to put the fear of him upon you so that you don't do all these other types of things. And then the people stood at a distance. Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. Just really quickly, this little chart, we're not going to go over it much. What starts happening here in 2022 is that we start having what's called a covenant code. And the covenant code is going to go through, chapter 23, verse 33. So here in 2022, going all the way through 23:33, are a series of laws organized in a certain way that has to do with the way, and again, these are laws. These aren't just principles. These are actually casuistic laws that organize the way in which Israelite society is imagined to be. So far, so good? Cool. And you can see what I've done here is that these things are organized. Actually, they're organized, it's sort of in a top-down type of thing. And that is the very first thing that this is going to be important, this is going to come up later, so remember this, because I'm going to ask you about it in a later lecture. The very first law in the covenant code has to do with our worship of God. Which makes sense, because if there's been a dead horse that the Big Ten have beat over and over and over, it's that relationship is primary. Anything that deviates from that relationship, whether that's idols, whether that's using the name wrongly, whether it's treating every day as the same, whether it's how we treat people, anything that deviates, anything that detracts from that relationship, just So the very first thing is how we worship God, and that is it's called the law of the altar. And you can read it yourself. I'm not going to do it. And that is, you can't just sort of worship God however you want to. There are certain ways in which you worship God. Because I can almost guarantee you, if you worship God however you want to, you know who becomes the most important person in the worship relationship? You. I guarantee it. I've done it. So there are certain ways in which one worships. Starting in 21:1 and going through 23:33, there's a series of laws that have to do with human-human relationships, and they're sort of actually in a weird sort of way, in descending order. Again, if Roy Heller were God, me, myself, I would make, in talking about human-human relationships, the very first thing that I would have on the docket as far as human-human relationships is how one treats people that wear half eyes and have Brooks Brothers shirts. And sometimes wear bow ties. How you treat those types of people. That's what I would put first. In the covenant code, the very first thing that we talk about are people that have no rights, which is absolutely remarkable. Why would you talk about them? Exactly. The very first thing we talk about are the slaves, which is absolutely remarkable. Just really quickly, because this will come up again, I want to go through the slave law. These are the ordinances. Oh, these are real laws. These aren't just principles. These are ordinances. These are the ordinances that you set before them. When you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years. In the 7th year, he goes out a free person without debt. Apodictic or casuistic? Apodictic. That's right. When you do that, this is what happens. Here's the casuistic. Well, but, right, Hermione is in the back of the classroom. Raises her hand. Yeah, but what if? Yeah, so here we go. If he comes in single, he goes out single. If he comes in married, his wife goes out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and the children remain the master's, and he goes out alone. But if the slave declares, oh, I love my master, my wife, my children, not necessarily in that order, I don't want to go out. Then his master brings him before God, theoretically at the tabernacle or temple, and he's brought to the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl. Pierces his ear with an awl. And what do you think they put in that hole?
Earring.
An earring. Because an earring is a symbol of servitude. Golden calf. But anyway, pierces his ear with an awl, and he serves him for life. And then we talk about more. So again, I just do that to sort of show a way in which the covenant code as a whole is organized, and that is we have the apodictic principle, and then we have various cases. What about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? What about this? We start off with slaves, then we go laws concerning free persons, then we talk about laws concerning property. Then in 22:18, we sort of talk about laws of worship. That is the relationship between we have with God. Then in 22:21, we talk about relationships that we have with certain types of people, that is poor people. Then in 22:28, we have laws of offerings, that is the relationship we have with God. And then in 23:1, we talk about relationships we have with other people, that is society. And then in 23:10, we talk about festivals, that is our relationship with God. And then finally, there's a concluding sermon at the end. It sort of goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth between our relationship with God and our relationship with other people. It's funny, when you read the covenant code all the way through, you sort of get this idea that in fact there is no distinction between our relationship with God and our relationship with other people. It's almost as if you were to ask me what is the greatest commandment, I would say something like love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets, more or less, right? This relationship and this relationship are in fact not two different relationships. In fact, it's all part of the whole mess. One affects the other. And then it gets ratified in 24. Questions, concerns? Splendid. I know that you read, or at least I assigned. I know that I assigned reading the tabernacle. I want to talk about tabernacle next time when we talk about Leviticus. Sound good? Ooh. These are they really are very interesting things. Here's just one more thing about the law, and that is, if I were setting up a society, I wouldn't include it. I mean, I'm setting up a society. I probably would not have a law about what happens when you're walking down a road and you find an ox in a ditch. Seems as though a rather rare occurrence, something that probably doesn't happen every day. But me, myself, here's one of the principles I always work with. The Bible is smarter than I am. And that's not a principle most people work with. It seems to me that the way in which these covenant laws work, it's in fact not setting up the laws for a society. It's giving you little stories, kind of like we've been doing from the very beginning in this class. It's giving you little stories and telling you, here's something to think about. When you're walking down a road and you see an ox in a ditch, what do? Finders keepers, right? No, you take that ox, you spend your energy to get that ox out of the ditch, and then you have to find the owner. I can guarantee you that in that little story, there is all sorts of philosophical, legal ideas about what property even means. There's so many assumptions in that little story about what it means to even own something. I mean, you understand that ownership, there's nothing that you see here. There's nothing you can put your hands on that's called ownership. It's just a concept that we have, right? I can almost guarantee you that in that little story, there's all sorts of assumptions that you can build on to understand what it means to own something. And it seems to me that's what all of these laws have to do with. It's not about telling you what you have to do in certain situations. It's giving you almost like parables that you can use to discuss, that you can use to think, that you can use to even meditate or perhaps even pray about much larger issues besides oxen, indigenous. So anyway, that's what's sort of the case of it. Next time, Leviticus. Trust me, at the end of next class, it's gonna be awesome. You don't think it will, but it will. I know you don't think it will, but it will. So anyway, thanks so much.